Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon, and this is the year of Trails. Like, it's almost kind of ridiculous, right? There will be 4 Trails games releasing in the year of our Lord Estelle 2025. Trails Through Daybreak 2, Trails in the Sky First Chapter Remake, Trails Beyond the Horizon, and East vs. Trails in the Sky. I still remember having to, wait for a new Trails game, a long time. But if you haven't played Trails, you might be wondering what all the fuss is about. Why are people like me so obsessed with these games? I don't think there's ever been a better opportunity to get into Trails, so I want to take some time to give you all the reasons why this series is going to become your next obsession. And if you are into Trails, I hope you'll stick around and let me know your thoughts on the series down in the comments. Okay, let's go. Trails in the Sky is actually the 6th entry in the Legend of Heroes series from Falcom. Those first 5 games are interesting pieces of history, and you can even see some of the Trails DNA start to form within them, but you don't have to play them. The Trails games began their own continuity completely separate from all those games that came before. The series is divided into arcs as a way of providing comfortable entry points for people who didn't jump on board from the very beginning. The first 3 Trails games are the Sky arc, the next 2 are the Crossbell arc, the next 5 games are the Cold Steel arc, and now I'd say we're safely within the Calvert arc as of the making of this video. The first 5 games were released on the PSP, though we only ever got the first 2 here in the West back in the day. And even then, we only received the first game physically. It's right here. I just got it, finally. I'm so happy. I love it. I love it. It wasn't until the Cold Steel arc hit PlayStation 3 that the series started to gain ground over here. It took a while, but eventually Falcom committed to catching us up by releasing ports of all the games in the series onto modern platforms. The story takes place on the continent of Zemuria, which is broken up into several different kingdoms and countries. A lot of the big picture storylines are about the ways these various countries interact with each other. The gigantic empire of Erebonia seems to want to gobble up more and more land, for example, while the tiny country of Liberl just wants to be left alone. Then there's the nation of Calvert, which is a democratic republic similar to Western countries. Stuck smack dab in the middle of everyone is the tiny nation state of Crossbell, which plays a disproportionately huge role in the overall story. One of the genius aspects of the Trails games is the way it uses these different countries and the arcs that feature them as a way of onboarding new players. Each new arc not only completely changes the location, but it introduces a brand new collection of characters. Sure, you'll see plenty of cameos and major returning characters if you're familiar with past titles, but Falcom knew they needed to give players a way to get in at various points along the way. Each new game builds on the foundation laid by the games before it to the point where you'll feel a jolt of excitement when you come across an NPC you first met 10 games ago and haven't seen since, or when some obscure event from the game world's history that was mentioned 5 games ago comes back up in conversation, and especially when a favorite character from a previous arc shows up again in playable form. It's genuinely one of the coolest experiences, and the more Trails games you have under your belt, the more of those experiences you get to have. Very few games can offer you something like that. Kingdom Hearts can, Suikoden can to an extent, the Xeno series, sure, but none at this scale with this level of attention to detail. The storytellers at Falcom are madmen, and playing these games lets us reap the benefit of their insanity. The Trails series benefits a lot from having some of the best, funniest, coolest, kindest, most passionate main characters of any video game. As much as I like MCs like Cloud from Final Fantasy VII or even Faye from Xenogears, they don't reach the heights of the best that Trails has to offer. And I don't say that lightly. I know how much that's going to make some people mad. But look, Estelle Bright from Trails in the Sky is one of the best fictional people I'm aware of. She's a goofy kid, she's optimistic, she's awkward, she tries really hard, but she doesn't always succeed. She has the perfect balance of positivity and grim determination. She's a female character that doesn't rely on skimpy outfits to be appealing to an audience. All in all, I can't think of a better person to start the series out with than Estelle. And one of the great things about Estelle and about the way Trails tells its stories is that you get to actually see her growth continue well beyond the games she's the main character of. She starts out as a happy-go-lucky teenager, but where we're at in the story now, she's a still happy but much more focused young adult, and her relationships with her friends have all deepened like you'd expect over all that time. But I'm not even sure if Estelle is my favorite MC anymore, and that's because of Van Arkwright. Van takes over main character duties in Trails Through Daybreak, and he sort of ushers in a whole new type of storytelling. Which makes sense, right? After nearly 2 decades, a series like Trails needs to shake things up from time to time to keep it fresh. Van is a sort of private eye / fixer that'll take a job from anyone. Literally anyone, even some really bad dudes, so long as the job itself doesn't go against his own personal code. This causes the story to go to some pretty dark places, and the fact that Trails allows itself to be reinvented like this shows how committed Falcom is to making the series memorable. Van is sarcastic and sometimes surprisingly bitter for somebody who's only 24 years old, though I guess that's 24 in anime years, which makes him like 50 in actual human years, right? Being in my 40s, I think I'm pretty solidly dead in anime years. RIP. Anyway, despite some of his more curmudgeonly qualities, he has a strong sense of humor, and despite his morally gray day job, he has an incredibly strong moral compass. I had no expectations that Van might potentially supplant Estelle in my heart as my favorite MC, but here we are. I mean, I guess how I feel changes from day to day, but as of this recording, I think they're pretty much neck and neck. Even beyond having amazing main characters, the supporting casts are literally the best I've seen in any JRPG. You will love these characters. Now, I'm not saying you'll love all these characters equally, but I think you'll find that altogether they make up the best collection of characters ever put into a video game. The series experiments quite a bit with different ways of introducing you to its casts. For example, in Trails in the Sky and Trails Through Daybreak, it uses a more or less traditional method of bringing new characters in one by one as you progress through the story, giving you a decent amount of one-on-one time with them before incorporating them into the full group. Trails from Zero and Trails of Cold Steel use the opposite approach by basically giving you your entire team from the very beginning, which the story uses as a way of emphasizing the group dynamic. Both methods are really well executed, and even in the games with multiple characters dropped on you at once, you'll still have plenty of time to get to know each of the characters individually. Especially in Cold Steel, since that arc has the most titles. If I had to narrow down a favorite character from each arc, not counting main characters, I think it'd go like this. In Trails in the Sky, I think my favorite is Chloe. She's the princess in disguise trope we've seen a lot over the years, but the execution of her story is fantastic. She's kind, she doesn't see herself as better than anyone, she's full of self-doubt at the idea of having to take over the kingdom one day, but she's determined enough to stick with it despite all that. Also, she has a bird friend that she hangs out with, which I thought only pirates had, so that's extra cool. In the Crossbell games, I think my favorite is Randy. Maybe that's obvious, he's probably most people's favorite. He's on the police force like all the other characters, but he seems to fit the bill the least, even compared to the literal 14-year-old girl on the squad. He's rough around the edges, that sort of goofball whose behavior probably wouldn't be tolerated on a modern police force, but he's got that warm, gooey center to him, and he sort of acts as the whole group's big brother, which is genuinely heartwarming. In Cold Steel, it's a bit harder because there are like 10,000 characters in that arc, but I think my favorite is Fee. Some of that is her background. She was raised by a Jaeger Corps, which is basically a freelance paramilitary organization, so she's been shooting people since prior to puberty. She's in the process of putting that life behind her and dealing with some arguably well-deserved discrimination because of it. I think another part of it is her voice actress, Cassandra Lee Morris, who is just one of my favorite performers in games and anime. That definitely helps. And finally, in Daybreak, I'd say as of now my favorite is Agnes. She definitely feels like a kid trying to fake it till she makes it in the grown-up world, and that's really endearing to me. But heck, there are so many characters across the series, you're gonna find a ton that will top your list. Do you like a couple of bros who absolutely hate each other over pointless class nonsense, but over the course of time end up being begrudging best buds? You'll love Eustace and Machias. Big into teenage girls who are oddly super good at computers and probably have an undiagnosed mental condition or 12. Ren checks pretty much all the boxes. Fan of a lush who flirts indiscriminately and is constantly and appropriately punished for his bad behavior? Olivier is the guy for you. Seriously, it seems like there's no end to this roster and it keeps getting bigger. And rather than feeling overwhelming, you end up just finding more and more people to connect with as the story goes on. Seeing your favorite characters from one arc show up and start interacting and forming relationships with the characters in another arc is a JRPG joy that basically no other series lets you experience. Every one of the dozens of characters is on their own personal journey. Getting so many opportunities to check in with them after the credits have rolled on their own games is a uniquely Trails thing, and I love it so much. So obviously I've been talking a lot about characters and story and emotions and stuff like that, but the thing that makes this a series of JRPGs and not like a series of visual novels is the gameplay. Trails is one of the most unapologetically JRPG series in existence, and even though it's changed quite a lot from the early days, it still carries the torch for that traditional style of gameplay that so many commentators are quick to say JRPGs have abandoned. From the beginning, Trails has used a turn-based battle system that borrows a lot of great ideas from other games, while simultaneously incorporating so many brilliant mechanics of its own. Characters and enemies can move around on their turn, and placement actually makes a huge difference in how battles play out. Keeping your characters close together puts you at risk of damage from an enemy's area of effect attack, but spread out too much and you can't use buffs or healing arts on everyone at once. Each character can use a variety of crafts, which are basically special moves that cost craft points. These run the gamut from big attacks to buffs or debuffs, pretty much what you'd expect from a JRPG. But the biggest innovation on the special move front is the S-Break system. Once a character has at least 100 CP, which you accumulate through attacking and being attacked, you can have that character interrupt the flow of combat at any point to use a super move. This naturally drains all your remaining CP, so use it too early and you might put yourself at a disadvantage. But this is such a good system that MiHoYo admitted they took the idea from Trails to use in Honkai Star Rail. Besides crafts, you have arts, which are the Trails equivalent to magic spells. Everyone has an orbment, which is basically a device that takes these little crystals which allow you to cast spells. They look something like this, at least in Trails in the Sky. Technology in the world of Trails continues to evolve as the series goes on, and the orbments get more and more features. Different crystals in the orbment, different spells on your roster. This allows you an almost obscene level of customization with each character. Starting with the Calvard arc, Trails introduced an action combat system that sits right alongside the normal turn-based system it's been refining for decades now. This gives you the flexibility to wipe out trash mobs without having to spend the time going through a full turn-based battle if you don't want to. But here's the thing, these games all have high speed modes built in, so you can make the turn-based combat as fast as you want. They've learned a thing or two about how to build compelling gameplay systems over at Falcom, and they've also learned about convenience and how important it is to cater to a wide audience. I never use high speed mode in the modern Trails games, at least not on my first playthrough, but I have friends who do religiously. Having options like that makes it easy to recommend these games to anyone because you don't have to throw in the caveat of, oh, it's good, but you have to be patient. All the games have a variety of difficulty options too, so if you're really just here for the story, you can drop it down to very easy and coast through with no problems. If you're a masochist, there's Nightmare Mode, which does not sound like the sort of thing I would ever want to do, but hey, to each their own. If you find yourself losing to a particular boss too, the game will offer you the option of lowering the difficulty temporarily so you can get through, which, I'll admit, I've taken advantage of a few times over the years. Okay, a few dozen times. I swear, I'm good at video games. But honestly, the variety of difficulty options and speed settings give Trails the most accessible combat system in the entire JRPG landscape. Add to that the whole flexibility of the orbment system and the modern option of action combat, and you basically have what is, in my mind, the perfect battle system. Other games are starting to learn some lessons from this too. Metaphor from Atlas has optional action combat now, for example. Hopefully that trend continues and we start seeing as much accessibility and convenience from other series as we see from Trails. Falcom has been in the game for such a long time now. It can be easy to forget that they're among the oldest developers out there. They started out in the early 80s and they basically laid the groundwork for so much of the JRPG landscape. Considering that, it's really strange how unaware of them I was for most of my life. I mean, I definitely had heard the name Falcom before, but I always associated them with games that I had no interest in. Ys? No thanks. Not interested in a silent pro-tag hack and slash on some console nobody's ever heard of. The Legend of Heroes? I mean, could you possibly come up with a more boring name for a series? But I'm not afraid to admit it when I'm wrong, and man, was I wrong. It turns out the Ys series is among the best action RPGs out there, and despite its very vanilla name, The Legend of Heroes is the coolest thing I've ever played. A big part of what has made them appealing over the years is the music. I remember hearing about Red Book Audio when I was a kid and how the Ys games on TurboGrafx CD used it. I figured it had something to do with the magazine my mom read, which admittedly didn't spark much interest for me, but eventually I realized it just meant live recorded music. Like, no bleeps and bloops. And look, I'm a bleep and bloop lover, always been big on bleeps and bloops, but the music coming out of the early Ys games blew my mind. Not enough to convince me to buy a TurboGrafx 16, but then again, I was a kid, so I didn't have money anyway. Their musicianship has only gotten better over the years, and the soundtracks in the Trails games are monumentally incredible. One thing I love about them is the fact that they still make music that is undeniably video game music. Like, it's cool when composers score a game like a movie, right? It's cool, it's fine, it's whatever. But it's becoming less and less common to come across a game that's scored like games always used to be. You know what I mean, right? Tracks that are usually designed to loop indefinitely because developers wouldn't necessarily know how long it would take a scene to play out, since so much of it depended on how fast the player could read. Classic town themes, battle themes, character themes. A lot of the industry is moving to a combination of atmospheric and filmic music, but Trails is sticking with the classic sound, and I love it. Graphically, it's probably not going to blow you away, even though I and other Trails fans find the visual style charming. But one thing related to graphics that Trails is really smart about is asset management. By creating a big, consistent world for the series, they're able to reuse locations multiple times, which saves them a ton of money and also has the effect of making each of these locations feel emotionally more resonant for the player, I guess. Like the city of Crossbell, for instance. It shows up in a bunch of the games, and as you play through the series, it starts to feel so familiar to you that you can navigate it with your eyes closed. And while that sort of feeling maybe isn't directly tied to the actual presentation of the game, I think by familiarizing us with these places, we're more tied to them, and as a result, we care so much more. Returning to a familiar place feels like coming home, and it's amazing that a series of video games can evoke that feeling. The crux of the overarching story involves this secret society called Ouroboros. They're made up of a bunch of extremely eccentric and sometimes extremely evil people, and yet somehow, despite seeing all the nasty crap they've done over the course of more than a dozen games, I'm still not convinced they're 100% bad. This is a series that loves to play in the gray area. Nowadays, I feel like there's been a push away from morally ambiguous storytelling in the name of protecting people from being negatively influenced. I think that's a big mistake. The world is so much more gray, so much more often than it is black and white, and Trails mirrors the real world in that way. Ouroboros has plans that involve the Septarians, which are these 7 magical artifacts that were left by the goddess Adios. These things have some crazy effects, and I don't want to delve into spoiler territory, but it gets nuts. The heroes of each game naturally find themselves opposed to Ouroboros. Well, at least most of the time. And while we haven't had a full revelation of their plans as of yet, we're getting more and more tantalizing clues as the series goes on. The thing about the story in this series is that there are so many layers to it. Each game has its own more or less standalone story that introduces its cast of characters, gives them a problem to solve, and then shows you everything they have to go through to solve it. At the same time, each arc has a larger story that is telling over multiple games, with each game furthering that story while telling its own. And then there's the overall grand plot of the Trails series as a whole, which is fed by the games and the arcs, and it's been increasingly feeling like it's building to something massive. I said earlier that the arc setup of this series creates nice, natural on-ramps for new players to jump in without having to play a dozen earlier games. That is true, and I think that's part of what has made Trails successful overall. Having said that, I personally think the best way to enjoy the Trails series is from the very beginning. Starting with Trails in the Sky gives you a full view of the overarching story that unfolds like a tapestry while still allowing you to enjoy the more personal stories of each game's cast. I made a video a year or two ago about the best place to start the Trails series, and the case I made back then was that you should start at whatever arc looks the most interesting to you. Honestly, I stand by that. I'd rather have you start Trails than look at the sheer number of games and say, forget it. That's too much. But now, I think we're reaching a point that the people who argue starting wherever you want and the people who argue starting from the beginning are going to start agreeing, because the Trails in the Sky remake is coming out this year, 2025. This takes the story and characters of the first game and updates it to a similar system found in the most recent entries, and man does it look good. Getting the full Sky experience with Estelle and Joshua and Olivier and everyone is basically a dream come true for Trails fans, and even though I've said this before, it's even more true today. There's never been a better time to start the series. Do I think you can jump in at Trails Beyond the Horizon or Trails Through Daybreak and still have a great time? Absolutely, I know you can. But if you want to catch the same crazy that I and every other Trails fanatic has, I think the Trails in the Sky remake is your best on-ramp. Sure, you might have to wait a bit between entries since there's 4 other games that still need to be remade, though I suspect they'll be pretty quick about getting those out. But you also have the full series completely available to play right now too, so if the Sky remake pulls you in, you can feel free to continue with the second chapter on Steam in its original version. And then you'll still be able to play and enjoy the remake when it eventually releases. This is an incredibly special series. No other series has done long-form storytelling quite the way that Trails has. And it doesn't seem like there'll be many other series like it, especially not with the release cadence that Trails has. We're getting so many Trails games, you guys. I know some people suffer from burnout when they play the same series for too long. I've experienced that sort of burnout myself, to be honest, but not with Trails. I've played and replayed all the Trails games so many times over the past several years, it's pretty ridiculous. My backlog is mad at me about it, but I just can't get enough. It's so fun to play through previous entries with knowledge of what will happen because you can see the plot threads being laid so far in advance. Watching character relationships evolve over time is incredibly rewarding too. And on top of all that, the games are just really friggin' fun. The gameplay has changed and grown throughout the series, but even going back to the first entries, the combat system is still so solid and well thought out. Each game introduces new mechanics so that even within a single arc, you're having a variety of experiences. Look, if this doesn't convince you to try Trails, I'm not sure what will, but darn it, I'm still willing to keep trying. Let me know in the comments if you still have reservations and I'll try and address them there. Thanks so much everyone for watching, I really appreciate it. And hey, if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, I'd be super grateful. Anyway, hope you have a great day, and until next time, bye.